Hello, my friends, and welcome to Quartet. So nice to have you with us. We're coming to you from all different kind of places today for this in-depth kind of conversation about some really interesting things associated with the huge kind of change that's coming downstream. We're going to ask the question, are we all getting played in some kind of an artificial way in which that's to our good? I'm joined today by Gregg. Hi, Gregg. How are you?
I am well. I missed the last quartet. It's good to be with you all today. I am just north of your location here in the beautiful state of New Mexico.
Yeah, I'm located here in Albuquerque. We're here for a conference that's a Tesla Tech conference that's going on for a couple of days. And Penny Kelly is here in the hotel with me. Hi, Penny. How are you?
Hi there. Yes, it's good to be here. I've been on the road for 10 days now. It's like, okay, another week to go.
It's nice to have you all here, and I'm sorry that Kingsley can't be with us. He's off on his way to Spain as we speak, and so the three of us are going to carry forth here for the next hour or so. So let's go around the table and say what's been on your mind. Penny, what have you been thinking about?
Oh, a couple of things. Several things, actually, a lot of things, if I'm honest. I think the biggest thing front and center has been the what appears to be just a very deliberate escalation in the Middle East. But everything in the US, and this leads to my second thing, is geared to like upset. Most of the news coming from outside the country is kind of ho hum. There's this problem. You know, it doesn't look that way from the US perspective. And when you listen and watch, when I think about the people, the good people that are involved, that are at the mercy of the idiots that are running things, I'm just like, oh my gosh. So that whole thing, that Middle East thing has really been bothering me. In fact, I almost didn't come out here because my intuition kept saying, might not be able to get home, might not, there might be, some sort of problem. And when I asked what that is, what's the problem? It kept coming back to the Middle East blowing up and everybody going berserk. So that has been on my mind. The second thing that I mentioned just kind of lightly was the what I'm going to call the limited, heavily biased perspective. Not that this is anything new, but it's been on my mind of the mainstream media and the difference between what is being presented and how that's being presented to us versus how that information is being presented elsewhere. And when I talk about elsewhere, I'm talking about Russia, I'm talking about China, I'm talking about Italy, France, Spain. I'm not sure how you say it, Haaretz, 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 which is the whole Middle East, or a very important news source in the Middle East. There's just no comparison between, all of those sources, and it's drastically different. One is geared to upset, and the other is geared to inform. So those are probably the two major things. The other thing is the creeping forward of BlackRock's plan and the financial. I was seeing, and I mentioned this last month and at the beginning of the month in other places where I've been talking, that after August 14th, all bets are off regarding the financial system.
Yeah, well, I'm here to confirm, at least from my point of view and from my sources, some of the same things. I just got a report, an article this morning from a trusted source of mine saying that the best astrologers they can find, they're saying that the war starts tomorrow. The United States and everybody else gets into a really big thing in the Middle East for about a week. and the United States backs away, licking their wounds after the end of a week because it isn't working very well for them. And so you and I may have an an interesting week here in the Crown Plaza Hotel.
Okay. All right.
Albuquerque. And then Greg's going to come down and visit us. So what's on your mind, Greg?
Well, we're all tracking the same things right here, maybe with a few subtle nuances. I am, first of all, Penny, I'm with you. I have actually, in January of this year, I canceled all of my international travel. I didn't know the specifics. I knew that we were going to see war in at least two theaters, and that influence all of the travel systems and the economic systems. And I felt that there was a very real possibility I could be not personally threatened, but easily stuck in a nation on the other side of the planet for months. And so I have canceled that travel. We typically take groups into the Holy Lands toward the end of this year, and we're not doing that obviously, but we have a lot of people on the ground. And this is what's interesting, John. I'm right with you on this, and Penny. Our people on the ground are telling us a very different story from the story that's portrayed through the mainstream media. So I'm watching closely. There's obviously a conscious and intentional push toward war, and it's enough of a push to get things going. I don't know how much control anyone has over how that war, how far it spreads. And the mainstream media is not talking about this, but Monday of this week, Iran announced that they do now have nuclear weapons and they're willing to use them. And this first time that has happened, Israel is saying because of that, they feel that they have first strike, the right to first strike, where in the past they've only been doing defensive measures. So these next 2 weeks, I think we're going to see some really frightening things in the Middle East. It's affecting the world. It's affecting America. This is on my mind because our current administration has drained our national petroleum reserves. And when that war breaks out, the petroleum that we depend upon will be impacted. I don't know if it'll be stopped. It'll be difficult. We don't have the 90-day reserves. They won't fill those reserves back. We don't have that right now. And what we saw happen with the markets on Monday of this week was a direct reflection, they don't want to talk about it, of the concerns of the economic impact of war and what that means. So those are all very much on my mind right now. We're going to talk about some other things today, so I'll just stop right there. But I think you and I, all three of us, are all watching pretty much the same things happening here.
Yeah, well, all the indications in terms of the financial markets, or at least the major ones, from the point of view of Martin Armstrong and others, is that this thing might have kind of a little double hump in the top of the thing, but it's going down. And certainly if this war business starts, that'll drive it down. And there are lots of different kind of people who are proposing and predicting that the bottom's going to come out of the whole thing. And so it's going to be a very interesting period of time. So it's time for questions. Walter Dragus says the question is mainly for Penny. How does this time frame line up with that of the ropes time frame mentioned in your book?
I think I wasn't sure what time frame he's responding to, but if he's talking about the timeline of what's happening out there in the world, it lines up 100%. The Robes originally said from 2015 to 2021 is your last window of opportunity to avoid what appears to be coming, to avoid the results of what you are creating. And 2021 was when the thing in the arm started coming out big time. And a lot of people fell for that. And so there are other things that they mentioned in the book that that there would be an attempt to impose a medical ID to prove you were healthy. And I do see that happening. There have been so many like punches in the nose that we have taken, and there's some more coming that are bigger starting after the 14th of this month. It's almost a perfect match to what they said. So
It's an extraordinary time, and we're going to talk more about that. The coming months going through into the end of this year are going to be very, very memorable. And part of the what I'd suggest is that we all have to have is this clear kind of sense in the back of our minds, if not out in the front of our minds, that we're going to get through all of this, that at some level it is an integral part of this change from one era to another one. We are going to be the ones that are going to help build the new world out of the back end. Thanks so much for all of these good comments. Let's move on to our topic of the day. As I've alluded to, and we've talked about on this program a number of times, what we have is this growing sense of irrationality. Things don't work. They don't make sense. There's something strange in the works here, and it's very frustrating. I mean, you can see it, for instance, in some of the pundits, alternative pundits for sure, who are really frustrated because the media doesn't respond objectively to what's going on in the world. And you say to yourself, I mean, how uninformed are you to believe that the media should be talking about things that are objective and open and so on? I mean, if you know anything about the history of the CIA and Project Mockingbird and all of those kinds of things, and you know that it's all controlled. And if you look at it through that grid, then you can see how the control happens, how the same words and phrases and ideas all show up almost instantaneously across all the platforms, which clearly shows that these are not original ideas that these folks have, but they are being fed information, in this case, almost certainly from the CIA or other kind of the intelligence agencies. And so if you understand the larger kind of picture about what in fact is what's going on, then it clearly informs, or far more clearly informs, what you're seeing on a day-to-day basis. Well, if you raise that basic concept up to much larger level, you have to say to yourself, what in the world is going on this planet? Because it does not make any rational sense. You've got all these reports of world leaders having been killed, and now they got body doubles that are up, or in some cases they're very compelling indications that there are people wearing Joe Biden masks. I mean, the last time that he showed up, he was 6 inches taller than he's ever been before. And you say, so who's Joe Biden today? And it just is very strange in any kind of conventional terms. And you keep asking yourself, I do at least, what in the world is going on? And what it does is it forces me to kind of back up a little bit and say, what kind of indications are there that suggest that there is a larger kind of story, a larger kind of initiative agenda here that's in place, and that makes sense out of all that we're seeing right now? Well, there are indications of that. There are not a lot of them, for sure, but there are multiple sources. A number of them say that that the strategy, the grand strategy, is here to just drive humanity right up to the cliff, the edge of the cliff of some kind of existential event, and scare everybody into the reality and the realization that we can't keep going on the way we've been going. In the process, by the way, kind of smoking out the major kind of purveyors of the status quo, and identifying those folks that need to be moved out of the system and and not be a part of the new world that emerges. And so you look at that and you say, well, how does that work? And what in the world is going on? Because on one hand, when you look at it, seems very well organized and orchestrated and very sophisticated, and this is not random kind of things going on. It's random irrationality, which then says there's a larger kind of agenda here. And so our question today kind of is this, are we in some kind of, are we players in pawns, if you will, in a play or some kind of a larger kind of process that is being used to kind of move us all over to a place where we understand and realize in far more tangible ways than we have in the past that we just can't keep living this way anymore. Is this kind of what, 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional chess, as they talk about, where there are forces that are at higher levels that have a larger kind of high overview that are saying, well, we need to make them kind of move this way, and so we'll put some fear in here and a little here, there, and so on. Certainly there are things going on that make no sense to us at our level, and it probably must at some higher level make some sense. And the question is, so is that what's going on? Are we being played in a benign kind of way at a higher level? And much the way in which you would train an animal or raise children, how do you kind of move them one way or another without them realizing the larger picture about what is going on in order for you to get the desired behavior out of the path, out of the back end of the whole thing? And so, Penny, what do you think?
Well, I have maybe a little different perspective than a lot of people because I see that from when you take into account the big picture, it's so clear to me that the planetary takeover is still in progress. There's an effort on the part of some people and some beings, higher beings, who are not very honorable, to take over the planet, get control, because this planet is a member of a group of about 20, almost 24 planets in this sector of the galaxy that are in a very, very good location. And you have to wrap your mind around intergalactic as well as interdimensional kinds of concepts. We don't have that background yet. Most people don't. So it's like, what are you talking about? However, other planets have already been taken over, and there's a war going on to prevent the takeover of this one, and this one is particularly rich. This is, when you've been to other planets, other reality systems, they aren't as, they don't have the level of life that we have here. This is an amazing planet. It's a living library in many, many ways. And people come here to get DNA patterns for all sorts of things to take back to their place to try to simulate or start or rejuvenate their planet, their reality system. And this place has it all. And so that's a little different perspective than what most people would consider. But once you see that it's a takeover effort and somebody wants control of this particular planet, and then, and I know the whole process of getting that control, which I've talked about at the Arlington Institute. So what we end up with when you ask the question, are we being played? Yeah, we are to some extent. And I thought the way you laid out the questions, that I was chewing on for the last 24 hours was a really good depiction of here's one side. They're playing us. They're trying to make things happen. They are trying to scare us into some kind of behavior. And then there's this other perspective that says, don't fall for that. Maybe this is for a higher good. We'll come out of the back end of this in terms of really powerful kinds of perceptions, experience, wisdom, all of those things that we need. But, there at this point, for the average person on the street, it's almost impossible to tell what is really happening. And so the best advice I could give would be sit back and watch and learn and pay attention to your own ethics. I think we have to stop and identify our ethics. What are we committed to? Are we committed to peace? Are we committed to cooperation? Are we committed to generosity, to health, to joy, to love, to, beauty? Why don't we have all those things? We've been distracted away from them. And so in the long run, that whole business of I'll call it, of trying to, well, let me speak from my normal perspective, okay? From the point of view of where we're at now, we the people as a group have to decide whether we're going to take a step up in consciousness or whether we're going to go down with the ship that is currently not able to be sustained because people are right in the middle. They're too, I'll say, awake to be able to tolerate much more of what's been going on. And they're not educated or internally coherent enough to be able to envision what are the options. And the options are to make commitments to a new kind of consciousness, a new level of consciousness with new, beautiful new ideas behind it. How do we raise our vibration? You make a decision. And then you stick to that decision, and then you catch yourself violating that decision over the next few weeks or months or however long it takes. And that changes your frequency. So as I look at what I see happening, somebody wants us to fight. We don't have to fight. Do we need to change? Yep. But do we need to change in the direction that they're pushing? I don't think so. We can change and go in our own direction. And that is going to take some courage. It's going to take some dialogue. It's going to take some getting together and really sharing at a deep level without getting lost in the muck. I find people just want to talk about the muck and they don't, they can't get past that to get into, but what are we building?
I think you make a really good point, and that is that you cannot let the narrative as it's being generated and all of the subsidiary aspects of it be important to you.
No.
You call it the muck, and I'm just the whole system is trying to carry us down a track that is antithetical to where we're trying to go and where we want to go. And so you really do have to get to the place where you make your own decisions. I think that's the essence of this transition, by the way. This new era is learning to make your own decisions and deciding for yourself where you're going without letting others do that. Gregg, what do you think?
Well, we're all tracking on the same idea, different nuances from each of our perspectives, for sure. John, you asked the question, are we being played? We're definitely being played. There is absolutely no doubt in my mind about that. You, in the question you sent to us, you asked if it was for our greater good. And the question is, who is we and whose good are we talking about? You're talking about systems thinking. We're looking at this from a very, very high perspective. So from my perspective and everything that I'm seeing, and Penny, we've talked about this as well. We are all casualties of an ancient battle that has been playing out since the first of our kind emerged mysteriously on this planet. A battle between good and evil is the way that we typically think about this. And that shows up sometimes kinetically in physical wars. It shows up often psychologically and emotionally and in manipulation and deception. And both of those things have played out throughout history. What's happening now is we are up against an expiration date, if you will, of 2030. That number has been identified by a number of organizations for a number of reasons, cosmological reasons, geophysical reasons, reasons of social engineering. So we'll just say 2030. So we're seeing an acceleration as we approach that date of all the things that need to happen in order for Earth and the people of the Earth to be at the place that is envisioned by these powers that be. From my perspective as a scientist, as a geologist, and we talked about this on some of these programs, I began looking at the planet itself. If we were to meet all of the goals that are proposed from WEF and from the UN and 17 Sustainable Development Goals and all of that, if we were to meet those goals of carbon dioxide, of global temperature, we would find ourselves on a planet that we have not seen since the mid-Pleistocene geologic era. And if people aren't familiar with that, what I'll just say is it wasn't good for us. It was not good for life. The CO2 levels were so low that the forests were choked, they died, temperatures were 10 degrees cooler on a global average. Ice sheets covered the upper third of our planet. Sea levels were lower because the water was tied up in the ice. It was not a good time for human life. So we have to say that the geophysical parameters that are being pushed, they're not good for us. They don't benefit us. Now, people, if beings or life forces from another world wanted to take this planet because of the resources Penny is talking about, they would not want to destroy the very resources, including human resources. We are seen as a resource in a sense. You wouldn't want to destroy that. So it wouldn't work to do this from an outside attack in. It would make more sense to lead people to destroy themselves, to exhaust their war machine and destroy their own societies from within that would make them much more vulnerable to solutions that are coming from outside of our traditional sources. And that is precisely what I see happening right now. And you know, this is, I mean, there's actually a map for this. The Dead Sea Scrolls, if you take them as a historic document, forget about the religion. They were discovered in 1946, 47. They were not released to the public, the translations, until the 1990s. And the reason is because what we're talking about right now. Among those scrolls, the first scroll that was discovered in cave number 1 is called the War Scroll. And it is a scroll that describes the battle between what is literally called the sons of darkness and the sons of light. Today, we would call it the sons and daughters of darkness and the sons and daughters of light. And it's so specific, John, it identifies the names of the nations and the number of battles, 7 great battles. 6 of them, 3 of them will be won by the sons of darkness, 3 by the sons of light. The 7th will be determined by what we would call a divine source. So, and the sons of light actually win. And people say, well, maybe that's a metaphor. At the same time, 1945, the oldest records of the New Testament were discovered, and they were not released until 1971. And the reason is because they contain documents, original books of what we today call a Christian Bible. The books today don't look like the books that were discovered because they've been modified, and there were books that were lost and missing, lost gospels, for example, that tell us how to empower ourselves to triumph in this great battle. And it's a very, very different way of thinking. But ultimately, this is a battle for the geography and the geophysical battle for Earth and for our humanness, because it is through our humanness that we access a force and a power that frees us from fear. And fear is the greatest commodity in the battle that we're looking at right now. When we become the full extent of what it means to be human, we are no longer vulnerable to those forces. That's what those Gnostic texts are telling us. So we have a map telling us how the battles play out, who is involved, and then what we do if you're looking for ancient validation. If you don't need that, just look at what's happening in the world right now, and you can see exactly what's playing out. Penny, you're right on when you say this. What do we do? I think what we do is we stand up for our humanness, for the values that we cherish in our lives, the values of freedom, to think, to create, to innovate, to express, the freedom to care for ourselves, the freedom to be healthy, and allow the intelligence of our bodies to respond to the world in the way they were designed without the external forces. We're being conditioned to believe that we are flawed forms of life and that we need something outside of us, and that something is being touted as technology. And our young people are being encouraged to replace their physicality, their own bodies, with technological gadgets and devices. And what I want to say, I've just done I can't talk about this a lot. A film crew just came here to Santa Fe to film an entire documentary based on what we're talking about right now that will be out before the end of the year from a very well-known producer. You'll recognize the name. And my part of that film was showing the science that now is demonstrating, nobody's talking about this stuff. Our human capacities meet and in many cases exceed what we're being asked to embrace through transhumanism. Computer chips in the brain, chemicals in the blood, immune system enhancers. I'll just give one example. We now know that we don't know the top end of the capability, the capacity of human neurons. A computer chip is limited by the physics of the stuff it's made of. Every time they push neurons to what they think is their limit, we are so sophisticated that we morph and adapt to open the door to a greater state. We are a highly advanced, technologically sophisticated, soft technology. That is what the battle is all about, is being able to hijack our humanness while the planet is being remade, geoengineered for a form of life that does not benefit the way that we benefit from the green, the oxygen, the warmth that we do right now. So this is the big context. We are being played, and we're being played to destroy ourselves from within to make room for something else. So when people are watching us to say, what do we do? Every moment, every day of our lives, we're making choices. Everything from the food we eat to the way we address one another and the way we allow people to speak to ourselves. And here's the question we all need to ask. Are we making those choices from the love of what we know is possible in our lives, or from the fear of what happens if we don't? Are we, in other words, what is the world at our doorstep making us into? What are we becoming in the presence of the challenges that we see? And is it what we want to become? Or is the narrative in the mainstream media driving us to become something that we would never choose to be in a million years, to become vengeful, angry, hateful, divisive people? And when we see that, those are the cues that will guide us to make the choices from love rather than fear. So I'm going to stop there, but I wanted to say that for our community.
Let me just make a couple of comments in there. If you look back over time, what you see is that there's been this very calculated attempt to separate us from Mother Nature. We emerge from nature. And I'm going to quote Alan Watts here, who's just have made some amazing observations. He said, in the same way that the ocean waves, the earth peoples. So the attempt has been to get us to separate from nature. As soon as that's accomplished, you don't have any security. You're lost. Now you're dependent on what you're being told, on the narrative.
Well, it seems to me that in addition to having this orientation toward love, this active orientation toward love and away from fear, and this kind of reconnection with nature in the broadest sense, being open to communications and other such things, is that there is a real need, and I've talked about this a good bit, to start to build a vision about where we want to go, an alternative to this, rather than just kind of how do you deal with the present kind of problems that we've got or the issues we have. How do you start to point this in a new direction? And that's this whole idea of a new world.
The beauty of what you're saying is whatever we build in the world is a reflection of the way we see ourselves and our relationship to the world. It's our story. So when we see ourselves as separate from the world, as Penny's referring to, then we will see ourselves as dominating the world of nature and exploiting the world of nature. When we begin to see ourselves as part of rather than separate from, then we build that into the technology. We build that into what we're doing. And this, people don't talk about this a lot, but I think this is very important. Part of what's happening now, we are a generation of healing. There's a generational healing that happens with us. We don't want the new world that's emerging to be based on the fear and the hate and the suffering that we all lived through in the 20th century and our ancestors did before that. So as we write the new human story and we heal that within ourselves, you don't have to have a baby to pass that on. You're actually, that vibe is being healed in the field that connects all things. Our healing, every individual's healing, becomes the bridge that makes it a little easier for a next person and next and next. So we begin to tune into a part of the field that solves problems differently, and that sees us as part of rather than separate from. And that can happen pretty quickly. It doesn't take generations. And I think that generational healing, this generation has to be a strong generation. The people that are leaving, and the people that are still here are here because they're strong and they know this. And we're being asked to change the whole system while we're still in the system, which is just a mind blower, not from out here, but from inside the system, and to think and feel differently than we ever have in our lives. And I think that's the opportunity for all of us. It's a beautiful thing when we see it from that perspective.
We need a vision. What does that new world look like, operate like? How does it feel? What do you do from morning to night? The question that I often ask is, why is every form of technology that we have created deleterious, not compatible, not nurturing to the human system or life in general? Look at all the waste we generate, and nobody bothers to solve that problem. Look at how the 60 cycles per second is the standard, electrical cycle. That doesn't help cells. It interferes with meiosis and mitosis. Why did we choose that frequency? What kind of energy frequency is that technology based on that it nurtures perfect health? Freedom, true freedom, is the freedom to govern yourself, period.
Yeah, and I'm going to talk about some of those things, Penny, in my talk here at Tesla Tech on Saturday. And for our viewers who might be interested in that, if you go to search on Tesla Tech, you'll find that this is a 4-day conference, and they're going to live stream it, and it's only going to be $99 in order to track, be a part of all of those presentations. And Gregg's coming down, and we're going to do a couple of things, like I said, on Friday, Saturday, and you'll be there on Sunday. And what I'd like to do for our viewers is remind you that this comes from the Arlington Institute, and we're located when I'm not on the road in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, our little small resort town in the Appalachian Mountains down the road from Baltimore and Washington, where we're carrying forth in a whole variety of things that are all about this expanded awareness of who we are and what we can become in the face of the most significant kind of change that this planet, and in recorded history at least, that we've ever seen. So thank you very much for being a part of this. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Thank you, John Penny. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.